The late afternoon sun was dipping behind the jagged skyline of the city, casting long shadows over the cracked pavement and shattered glass that littered the streets. The air was thick with dust and the faint scent of smoke, remnants of battles, fought hours, days, even weeks ago. The convoy rolled cautiously, a line of armored vehicles and trucks carrying humanitarian supplies. Escorted by a platoon of soldiers, Captain Ayan Malik sat behind the wheel of the lead Humvee, his eyes scanning every rooftop, every alleyway for any sign of movement. His jaw was tight with focus, the weight of responsibility heavy on his shoulders. Around him, his men sat tense, rifles in hand, ready for any sign of danger. The city had been silent for too long, a calm before the storm. Ayan's radio crackled with updates from the other vehicles. Voices clipped, but calm. The mission was straightforward. Escort the convoy to a shelter where thousands of civilians had taken refuge, trapped by the ongoing conflict. They had enough supplies for only a few days, and the pressure to succeed was immense. Failure meant starvation, exposure, death for innocent people. Ayan had seen enough loss to know that every second counted. As they approached an abandoned market square, the convoy slowed. The buildings around were hollowed-out husks, windows broken, walls scarred by bullets and mortar shells. An eerie silence hung over the place, too quiet, too unnatural. Suddenly, a sharp crack split the air, then another. Bullets ripped through the sky, whizzing dangerously close. The first signs of an ambush? Instinct took over. Men dove for cover, shouting orders, weapons firing back into the shadows. The roar of gunfire echoed between the ruined buildings, punctuated by screams and explosions. Ayan's heart pounded in his chest as he jerked the Humvee to a stop behind a toppled streetlight. Through the dust and smoke, he spotted movement insurgents, hiding behind debris, aiming carefully. One bullet hit the engine block with a loud clang. The convoy was trapped. Then came the worst sight. Lieutenant Samir, Ayan's closest friend and second in command, was hit. He collapsed to the ground, clutching his leg, blood pooling beneath him. Ayan didn't hesitate. Leaping out of the vehicle, he ran across the battlefield with bullets flying past him, shouts ringing in his ears. Samir, he called, pulling his friend behind a rusted car. The world around them seemed to blur. Explosions, shouting, orders being barked. Ayan gritted his teeth, the pain of a graze on his arm ignored. "Hold on, Samir," he said, gripping his friend's shoulder firmly. "I've got you." The insurgents advanced, firing relentlessly. Ayan's voice stayed steady over the radio as he called for reinforcements, knowing they had only minutes to hold their ground. The smoke thickened, shadows danced like specters. Every second stretched into eternity. As bullets tore through the air and men fell beside him, Ayan locked eyes with Samir and whispered, with a fierce determination, "As long as I'm here, you won't die." The battle was far from over. The echo of gunfire filled the ruined streets as Captain Ayan Malik and Lieutenant Samir fought tooth and nail for survival. Time seemed to warp. Seconds stretched into minutes as chaos swallowed the world around them. The once orderly convoy was now a shattered line of armored hulks and scattered bodies, and the enemy's shadows crept closer with every heartbeat. Ayan could feel the sting of a bullet grazing his arm, but adrenaline drowned out the pain. His focus was unbreakable. He was the shield between his men and death. Suddenly, an explosion tore through the air nearby. A bomb planted in the rubble detonated with terrifying force, sending shards of concrete and metal flying like deadly arrows. Ayan was thrown to the ground, his vision swimming with pain and shock. He tried to move, but agony bloomed in his thigh. He looked down and saw the crimson stain spreading rapidly. The bullet had shattered his femur. A cold fear gripped him for a fleeting moment. He had been trained for war, but nothing could prepare him for this kind of pain or helplessness. Some crawled over to him, his face pale but resolute. "Captain, stay with me," he urged, pulling Ayan behind the remains of a burnt-out vehicle. Ayan gritted his teeth, refusing to give in. He reached for his pistol, firing blindly at the advancing insurgents. Each shot was a desperate promise. He would not fall without a fight. Around them, the world was a hellscape of smoke, fire, and death. But in that moment, the bond between the two men was unbreakable. Ayan's mind flashed back to his childhood memories of running through fields with his little brother, the sound of his mother's laughter, the quiet nights spent dreaming of a peaceful future. All the hopes he had carried into this war now boiled down to a single truth. As long as he was alive, his men, his family, his brothers in arms, had a chance. The thought steeled his will against the pain threatening to pull him under. "Samir," he whispered hoarsely, "as long as I'm here, you won't die." The firefight intensified. The insurgents sensed victory, pressing harder, their gunfire more brutal. The convoy's remaining soldiers regrouped, pushing back fiercely. Ayan's squad fought with everything they had, but the situation was dire. His body weakened, his breath ragged, yet he refused to surrender. With trembling hands, he radioed command for evacuation support, praying help would come in time. Through the haze of blood and smoke, Ayan's eyes locked on Samir's, a silent vow passing between them, a promise of survival amidst the carnage. Then darkness edged closer. His strength waned as the wound bled unchecked. But even as his vision blurred, his spirit blazed with defiance. The war was far from over, and as long as Ayan Malik was breathing, he would be the shield between his brothers and the void of death. The battle had claimed many, but one thing was certain, his vow would stand against the storm. As long as I'm here, you won't die. Time lost all meaning amid the relentless storm of bullets and chaos. Ayan's world narrowed to the sharp pain in his leg, the strained breaths of his comrades, and the desperate urgency to survive. The sun had dipped further below the horizon, casting the battlefield into a twilight gloom where shadows grew longer and threats multiplied. Though wounded and battered, Ayan refused to surrender. He lay on the broken pavement, blood soaking through his uniform, his vision flickering between darkness and the ghostly outlines of the ruined city around him. Somewhere nearby, he could hear the faint murmur of radio chatter. Reinforcements were on their way, but the minutes felt like an eternity. Ayan's fingers twitched as he reached out to grasp Samir's hand, his grip weak but filled with unyielding resolve. "I'm still here," he whispered, voice hoarse but steady. "As long as I'm here, you won't die." It was a mantra, a promise, and a lifeline all at once. His thoughts swirled, memories of childhood, family dinners, laughter and dreams, each one fueling his determination to fight for every breath. Around him, the battlefield was a shattered maze of abandoned vehicles, shattered glass, and twisted metal. The distant crackle of gunfire was slowly fading as enemy forces retreated under pressure from incoming support. But the danger was far from over. Ayan's body trembled with shock and exhaustion. Every pulse of pain from his shattered leg was a cruel reminder of his mortality. Yet his spirit burned fierce, refusing to give in to despair or darkness. He thought of his squad, the men who looked up to him, who depended on his strength and leadership. He had promised to bring them home, and no wound, no bullet, no darkness could break that promise. His breath came in ragged gasps, sweat mixing with dirt and blood. The cold night air bit into his skin, but inside, a fire blazed. "I can't leave them," he thought fiercely. "Not now. Not like this." Despite the fog creeping at the edges of his consciousness, Ayan clung to life with stubborn defiance. His heart beat steady beneath the wound, each thump a reminder. Betty was still fighting. "As long as I'm here, you won't die." The words echoed again, louder now, filling the void. Ayan Malik was not ready to fall. Not today. Not while his brothers still fought beside him. As the twilight deepened into night, the battle's fury began to ebb, replaced by an eerie, hollow silence that settled over the scarred battlefield. The once unyielding storm of gunfire and explosions dwindled to distant echoes, signaling the arrival of reinforcements. Ayan Malik lay on the cracked pavement, drenched in blood, every breath a laborious effort. But his eyes remained open, sharp and vigilant, despite the fading strength in his body. The world around him was a surreal tableau of destruction. Shattered vehicles burned with flickering orange flames, and the acrid scent of gunpowder hung thick in the cold night air. The medics arrived, their faces set in grim determination as they rushed toward Ayan, and the wounded soldiers clustered around him. Samir, though bleeding and exhausted, stayed by Ayan's side, refusing to leave his captain's side even for a moment. The medics moved quickly, assessing wounds and preparing stretchers under the harsh glare of searchlights piercing the darkness. As Ayan was carefully lifted onto a stretcher, a flicker of pain shot through his leg, but he clenched his jaw and nodded, his will overriding every nerve, screaming in agony. "We'll get you through this, Captain," one medic assured quietly, as they carried him toward the armored ambulance waiting at the edge of the street. Inside the vehicle, the atmosphere was tense but purposeful. Ayan's breath was shallow and ragged, each inhalation a reminder of the battle still raging within his body. The ride to the field hospital was a blur of sirens, jarring turns, and muffled voices, but through it all, Ayan remained conscious, eyes flicking open whenever the ambulance jolted, muscles straining against the relentless pain in his shattered leg. The doctors at the field hospital were prepared. A whirlwind of movement greeted Ayan as he was wheeled into the emergency room. Nurses and surgeons moved with practiced efficiency, their voices calm but urgent as they worked to stabilize him. The shattered femur was beyond simple repair. Metal plates and screws would hold the bones in place, but the recovery would be long and grueling. Blood transfusions fought to replace the loss that had left Ayan weak and pale, but his heart beat steadily, a beacon of hope in the darkness. Hours stretched into an endless vigil as the medical team battled to save their patients. Every monitor beeped and every drip in the floor was a reminder of how close Ayan had come to death. Outside the sterile walls of the hospital, the war raged on, but inside, a quieter battle for survival unfolded. In the days that followed, Ayan's hospital room became a sanctuary for his squad, many of whom visited daily despite the exhaustion and trauma they carried themselves. Samir never left his side, recounting the events of the battle and the courage shown by every soldier. "You saved us all," Captain Samir said one evening, his voice thick with emotion. "If you hadn't been there, I don't know if any of us would have made it." Ayan's lips curled in a faint smile, the familiar weight of leadership settling back onto his shoulders despite the physical toll. "As long as I'm here, you won't die," he repeated quietly. His vow was much for himself as for his men, but the war had left its mark beyond the physical wounds. The months that followed were a grueling test of patience and resilience. Rehabilitation was slow and painful. Every step, every movement was a reminder of the cost paid in that battle. Ion faced the harsh truth: his leg might never fully heal, yet his determination remained unbroken. He spent long hours in physical therapy, pushing past the limits of pain, refusing to surrender to despair. Friends and family rallied around him, their support a vital lifeline. But it was the memory of that battlefield, the faces of fallen comrades, and the burning promise to protect his men that fueled his recovery. One night, as the hospital lights dimmed and the ward grew quiet, Ion stared at the ceiling, thoughts swirling like the smoke that had once clouded the war zone. He replayed the moment of that promise, the words spoken amidst bullets and death. "As long as I'm here, you won't die." It was a pledge that had transcended the battlefield, a symbol of hope, sacrifice, and unyielding courage. His body bore the scars of war, his spirit was forged stronger than ever. He was no longer just a soldier wounded in combat, he was a living testament to survival, to the power of resolve in the face of overwhelming odds. Outside the city, remained shattered, but a fragile peace had settled. Ion knew the fight was far from over, both on the front lines and within himself. But with every breath, every heartbeat, he carried the promise forward. "As long as I'm here, you won't die." The words echoed in the silent room, a vow, binding him to his past, his comrades, and the future yet to come. The story of that day, the bullets flying, the fall, and the unbreakable spirit was far from finished, and neither was he. The road to recovery was a lonely and relentless one. Ion Malik found himself trapped between two worlds, the fierce battlefield where his purpose had been clear, and the sterile confines of the hospital and rehabilitation center, where every day was a struggle not just against physical pain, but against despair itself. His leg, once a pillar of strength, now felt foreign and fragile beneath him. Each movement was a battle, each step a reminder of what he had lost. But what weighed heaviest was not the pain or the uncertainty of his future, it was the haunting burden of survival. Survivor's guilt gnawed at him relentlessly. He would lie awake at night, the faces of those who had fallen etched vividly behind his closed eyelids. Friends who had shared laughter and fears now gone silent forever. He replayed every moment of the ambush, every decision made in those precious seconds, questioning if he could have done more, moved faster, saved another life. The memory of Salmir's wide eyes, full of trust and pain, was both a comfort and a curse. "You promised we wouldn't die," Samir had said, breathless and wounded. Ion's vow echoed back at him in the dark. "As long as I'm here, you won't die." But what did that promise mean now, when he was confined to a hospital bed, and the war raged on without him? The soldiers who visited carried their own wounds, visible and invisible. They looked to Ion not just as a captain, but as a symbol of resilience. Yet beneath the steady gaze, Ion wrestled with the truth that surviving sometimes felt more like punishment than blessing. He was haunted by the knowledge that he was alive, while others had perished, and that the fight had moved forward without him. Letters and messages from the front line reached him, filled with news of battles won and lost, friends gained and lost. Each word was a sharp reminder that life continued, indifferent to his pain and sacrifice. Despite it all, Ion refused to let despair define him. His determination hardened into a new kind of strength, not just the physical courage that had carried him through the ambush, but an unyielding will to heal and to lead once more. The physical therapy sessions were brutal. Hours spent coaxing movement from a shattered leg, rebuilding muscles that had withered under the weight of injury. Pain was constant, but so was the small victory of every regained inch, every faltering step. Nurses and therapists became comrades in his new battlefield, fighting alongside him against the limitations of his body. His family's presence was both a balm and a challenge. They offered love and support, but they also bore witness to his frustration and grief. Late-night conversations with his mother and sister peeled back layers of vulnerability he had long hidden beneath the armor of command. "You're more than your leg, Ion," his mother whispered one evening, eyes shining with unshed tears. "You carry the hearts of all who believe in you." Their words gave him strength, even as he struggled with the fear that he might never be the same man who had vowed to protect his men. And then there was despite his own recovery from injuries sustained in the battle, Samir remained a constant presence, a reminder of both the horrors they had survived and the unbreakable bond forged in fire. Together they revisited the battleground in memories, retelling the story of the ambush with grim pride and quiet reverence. "You were the shield," Samir said, clapping a hand on Ion's shoulder. "Because you held the line, we all lived to fight another day." It was not empty praise. It was a recognition of the sacrifice and courage that had carried them through the darkest moments. Slowly, Ion began to reclaim his identity beyond the wounds. He started to train his mind as fiercely as his body, studying new tactics and strategies, preparing for the day he could return to the field. The war had changed him, but it had not broken him. His promise, the vow that had sustained him through pain and fear, remained unbroken. "As long as I'm here, you won't die." Those words had become his guiding light, a beacon through the darkness of loss and uncertainty. Every day was a testament to survival, not just his own, but the survival of hope, brotherhood, and the relentless human spirit. The battlefield might have scarred his body, but it had also forged an iron will that refused to be extinguished. In that, Ion found his true strength, not in the absence of pain, but in the courage to face it head-on, and the determination to live up to the promise he had made amidst flying bullets and shattered dreams. Months passed, the seasons changing slowly outside the hospital windows, while Captain Ion Malek battled his own seasons of pain and hope within. Each day was a test, a grueling push against the limits of his shattered body and the creeping shadows of doubt. The physical therapy had become a routine of near-constant struggle, early mornings filled with aching muscles and frustrated tears, afternoons of determined training and painstaking progress, yet every small victory, whether standing unassisted for a few seconds or taking a shaky step, was a triumph over the darkness that threatened to swallow him whole. His comrades had not forgotten him. Regular visits from his squad kept him tethered to the battlefield, reminding him that the fight was far from over. Their stories of survival, hardship, and brotherhood renewed his resolve. Ion listened intently, storing every detail in the quiet fortress of his mind, preparing for the day he would return. That day was no longer a distant dream. It was a promise etched into the core of his being. The doctors were cautious but hopeful. His body was healing faster than expected, though the road ahead was long and uncertain. The shattered femur had been replaced with plates and screws, but the true battle was reclaiming the strength and mobility he once took for granted. The war had changed, the front lines shifted, alliances blurred, and new threats emerged. Yet Ion's desire to return was unchanged. "As long as I'm here, you won't die," he repeated silently, each breath a pledge to those who still fought. His injury had not diminished his leadership. If anything, it had deepened his understanding of sacrifice and resilience. He began studying new tactics, poring over maps and battle reports with a scholar's diligence, turning his confinement into a strategic advantage. His family became pillars of support, standing beside him in every step of his recovery. Nights were often filled with quiet conversations, memories, and reflections on what the future might hold. "You've always been a fighter," his sister told him one evening, her eyes fierce with pride. Not just on the battlefield, but here too. Her words echoed in his heart. The promise he made during that fateful ambush was no longer just about survival, it was about leading his men back to victory, no matter the cost. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in hues of orange and purple, Ion took his first unassisted walk outside the hospital. The world felt vast and overwhelming after months in sterile rooms. Each step was shaky, painful, but filled with determination. The cool air filled his lungs, a balm to his weary soul. Around him, the city bore scars of war, but life pulsed. In the streets, children laughing, vendors shouting, soldiers patrolling. It was a fragile peace, a reminder of what he was fighting for. Returning to duty was not just a physical challenge, but a test of will. Command offered him a role in strategic planning, but Ion yearned for the front lines. He wanted to stand shoulder to shoulder with his men again, to lead from the trenches where courage and sacrifice lived. His doctors cautioned patience, but his spirit was restless. "I will return," he vowed, "not as a shadow of my former self, but stronger." The scars on his leg were reminders of pain endured, but they were also symbols of a warrior's journey, a testament to the price of survival. As training resumed, Ion pushed harder than ever, defying expectations and even his own doubts. Every drop of sweat was a battle won, every aching muscle a step closer to reclaiming his place among the living, the fighting. His squad watched with awe and respect as their captain fought not just to heal, but to return to stand as their shield. Once more the war outside raged on, but inside, a quiet revolution was underway. Ion Malek was rising from the ashes of his fall, fueled by a vow that refused to break. The journey was far from over, but hope burned fiercely in his heart. "As long as I'm here, you won't die." Those words were no longer just a promise whispered in the chaos of battle. They were a battle cry for survival, for courage, and for the indomitable human spirit. And Ion was ready to lead once again. After months of grueling rehabilitation and mental preparation, Captain Ion Malek finally received the orders he had been waiting for, the green light to return to active duty. The news brought a surge of relief mixed with a fresh wave of anxiety. The battlefield had changed since his injury, and so had he. But the core of his spirit, the unbreakable resolve that had carried him through the worst moments, remained steadfast. With his prosthetic leg fitted and his body strengthened by relentless training, Ion prepared to rejoin his unit, to face the war that still threatened everything he held dear. The journey back to the front line was bittersweet, as his convoy rolled into the familiar but devastated wars on Ion's eyes, took in the landscape, once bustling neighborhoods now reduced to rubble, streets scarred by the constant echo of gunfire. His squad welcomed him with a mix of joy and quiet respect, their faces marked by fatigue but brightened by his return. For many, he was a symbol of hope, proof that even the deepest wounds could not extinguish the flame of courage. Yet Ion felt the weight of responsibility heavier than ever. He was not just a soldier, but a living testament to survival and resilience. The enemy had not been idle during his absence. New tactics, fiercer attacks, and shifting alliances made every mission more perilous. Ion's role evolved from leading charges to planning complex operations designed to minimize casualties while striking decisive blows. His years of experience, combined with the profound lessons learned through his recovery, made him a formidable strategist. But the true test awaited on the ground where decisions were made in split seconds and lives hung in the balance. 1. Cold Dawn Eon's unit was tasked with securing a vital supply route that had fallen under enemy control. The mission was fraught with danger, the terrain riddled with hidden threats. As they moved cautiously through the ruins, memories of his past battles flickered through Ion's mind, flashbacks of bullets flying, the sting of pain, the voices of fallen comrades. But this time, he was prepared. His prosthetic leg, though not a perfect replacement, was a tool of strength rather than weakness. His mind was sharp, his resolve hardened by every trial endured. The firefight that erupted was brutal and unrelenting. Enemy forces ambushed from concealed positions, turning the ruined cityscape into a deadly maze. Bullets tore through the air, explosions shattered the silence, and men fought with desperate courage. Ion moved with precision and calm, directing his squad with commands born from experience and instinct. His presence was a rallying point, a beacon amid the chaos. When a young soldier faltered under fire, Ion was there not just to lead, but to protect, to remind every man that they were not alone. Amid the storm of battle, a sharp pain flared in Ion's seat, a ricochet from a stray bullet grazing his ribs. The injury was minor, but it served as a stark reminder of the risks he faced. Yet, he pressed on, refusing to let pain or fear dictate his actions. Every decision was measured, every move calculated to safeguard his men while achieving their objective. The battle was fierce, but through teamwork and unyielding determination, Ion's unit secured the route, opening a lifeline of supplies to the civilians depending on them. In the aftermath, as the dust settled and the wounded were tended, Ion reflected on the journey that had brought him here. The scars on his body and the strength in his heart were intertwined, a narrative of survival, sacrifice, and unbreakable will. His vow echoed once more in his mind, a constant flame. As long as I'm here, you won't die. It was no longer just a promise to a friend in the heat of battle, but a creed that defined his life. In the face of new challenges and relentless danger, Captain Ion Malik stood unbroken, ready to lead, to fight, and to protect those who depended on him. The battlefield had changed, but Captain Ion Malik's resolve remained unshaken. Had passed since that fateful day when bullets flew and hope seemed lost. Yet his vow echoed louder than ever. As long as I'm here, you won't die. That promise had become a beacon not only for himself, but for everyone who fought alongside him. A symbol of courage and sacrifice that transcended the scars of war. In the quiet moments between battles, Ion found himself reflecting on what it meant to survive. Survival was not merely the absence of death, it was a daily battle to carry forward the memory of those who had fallen, to honor their sacrifice by living with purpose and strength. The faces of his comrades haunted him still, but no longer as ghosts of regret. They were reminders of the bond forged in fire, the brotherhood that war created and that peace demanded he cherished. Ion became more than a soldier. He became a leader, a mentor, and a symbol of hope to new generations of warriors. His story of falling and rising, of pain endured and promises kept was told around campfires and shared in hushed tones in the mess halls. Young soldiers saw in him the embodiment of resilience, a man who had faced death and refused to surrender. His physical scars were badges of honor, but his true strength lay in the unbreakable spirit that shone through his eyes. Outside the war zones, Ion found solace in the small moments, the laughter of children in liberated villages, the steady rebuilding of shattered communities, the quiet strength of families reunited. These glimpses of peace were victories, just as vital as those won on the battlefield. They fueled his determination to keep fighting, to keep leading. Every mission completed, every life saved was a fulfillment of his sacred vow. Yet, the promise he made to Samir, the promise that had carried him through the darkest hours, was not just about survival. It was about hope, about the belief that, even in the face of overwhelming odds, courage and loyalty could prevail. It was about being the shield when others could not stand, about standing firm so others could live. This legacy, forged in the crucible of war, would outlive bullets and battles. As the sun set over the horizon on a peaceful evening far from the front lines, Ion stood surrounded by his squad, now veterans carrying their own stories of survival. He looked at their faces, young, determined, carrying the same fire that had once burned in him. With a quiet smile, he placed a steady hand on the shoulder of the newest recruit, repeating the words that had saved lives and inspired hearts. As long as I'm here, you won't die. The words were more than a vow. They were a promise that would carry on long after the guns fell silent. Captain Ion Malik's story was not just about war. It was about the unyielding human spirit, the power of loyalty, and the courage to stand in the face of darkness. It was a story of falling and rising, of pain and healing, of promises kept against impossible odds. And as long as he was here, as long as his heart beat strong, the promise remained unbroken. No matter the storm, no matter the bullets flying, No one who stood with him would ever face death alone.